Thank you for tuning in to TalkWad.com, the world's fastest growing internet radio network. Please check out all the other great shows on www.talkwad.com.
Hi there, and welcome to Right at Five. I'm your host, Mona Lisa, and my guest today is JJ Noter. How are you today?
Very good. Thank you very much for having me today on the show.
I'm so excited. This is going to be an amazing show. I'm going to let you start off by just telling me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I was born in Bayshore, Long Island, New York, many years ago, and then we moved to Miami, Florida. I lived there for 6 years. And then I moved to Boise, Idaho. My father was working in law enforcement for many years before I was born. And pretty much based on that type of lifestyle, the culture was safer where we lived. And then one day my mom had a dream and wanted to move to God's country. So if you ever saw the movie Chevy Chase with a vacation and the station wagon with the wood panel doors, that was us driving across country. Wow. We had a little trailer in the back with little I Love Jesus signs and honk if you love Jesus and all this. So we drove across country and moved to Boise, Idaho, and St. Joseph's School is what I went to, and St. John's Cathedral is what we went to as far as a parish. Right. And I graduated high school in May 1987. Back then in Idaho, there really wasn't much going on at the time other than potatoes and all kinds of potatoes. So at that time, the movie Top Gun came out with Tom Cruise, and that was like the big hit, and everyone wanted to be a pilot and all that great stuff. So me and a bunch of friends decided to join the Navy. Some of them became backward warriors, where they just wanted to do it on the weekends, nothing really major. I traveled. I decided to go into for my future, my life. I was only 18, so I figured let's travel the world. So I joined. I went to San Diego for boot camp. And they give you a dream sheet of where you'd like to go. I picked everywhere but the States. So my first tour was in Japan. I was stationed on the USS Midway that worked on F-18s. Traveled the whole west coast of the world over there. And at that time, I had my supervisor, his Chief Holman, who was actually sent to Washington to do the orders where they send all the people that are coming out of boot camp or where they're going to be their next duty station. I went to Millington, Tennessee for electronics training, and which is just a small place right outside of Memphis, Tennessee. And when I was done for the 6 months of school, I was able to call Washington, and since I was already in the fleet, I was able to ask them or pretty much let them know where I'd like to go next. Right. And it happened to be him on the phone, and you know how guys razz each other. And then he said, "Where would you like to go?" And I said, "Well, let's try Europe on the other side of the world." I said, "Okay, can't promise anything, but we'll see what we can do." And I found out on Mother's Day in 1990 that I was going to Spain, and then that's where I was stationed for the last 2 years. So,
where in Spain? I
was stationed in Rota, and pretty much just worked all over. I was in a VQ-2 squadron, which was those big propeller jets, big fat planes, and pretty much did surveillance. That was all we did. So I got out in February 1993. Oh, wow, 20 years ago.
What happened to a life thing?
The life as far as... Well... Back then, the life was amazing. Traveling the world, that was what I wanted to do. And I figured if I'm going to travel, it would be on their dime. Okay. And then the benefits for my education, which I completed over the course of my life. And then the veterans benefits that I have continuous today. Okay. But that way of life, for being a family and being every 4 years sent somewhere else, it wasn't really the greatest opportunity at that time.
I know that.
Well,
I grew up in it.
That's what I was going to say. You were in the military, your family as well, so you've experienced it too.
It's like you move somewhere and, 18 months later, it's like, okay, pack up. We're moving to the next place.
Right.
So it's tough. It's a tough life, but it's also an amazing life.
Oh, for sure. Definitely,
So,
definitely.
yeah. So we are going to talk about your book. We're going to talk about two books, but we're going to start off with A Father's Love.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me what inspired you to write this book.
This was the book that I was inspired to write based on personal issues that I went through in my life at the time with my two boys. I have two boys that are, one's 19 now and the other one will be 8 next month. They were
Wow.
this was 3 years ago. So 3 years ago, there was some, things that happened in life, and I was able to go through something that I've always had my faith in God, and trying to always believe something happens, everything happens for a reason, and try to get something out of everything. And at that time, I went through a divorce, drama situation, separation, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So that's kind of the personal issues that's related to the book and my love for my boys. During that time, I journaled everything. I wrote it down in notebooks. Mostly, I guess I consider it self-therapy. Things that I was experiencing emotionally, physically, things that I was going through that helped me get through everything.
Right.
Plus, always believing that no matter what, I'm in it to win it. I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep going, however it turns out.
That's a great attitude to have. A lot of people are lacking that these days.
But, that's it. I mean, what we can do based on people, we can help each other, share our experiences, our love for God, whoever that is, to whoever they are. But there's always that inspiration that someone has from within that I was inspired to help myself.
Right.
And so I journaled everything, and the Father's Love, that's what it's called, mostly based on my love as a father for my boys and relating it to God's love for us as a father. So it's inspired based on the story that I went through, and then also with some scripture, and guided mostly because of what I went through at that time. I met a chaplain through the guardian ad litem, which is individuals. Usually, they work with foster kids in the foster care system.
Right.
And at one day in church, and all this is also written in my book. This is my journey that I went through. They were looking for volunteers to help the kids because unfortunately there are so many kids in the system that there's not a voice for them.
Right.
And I felt that once I met her, that this was the calling. I guess this is where at that moment I was supposed to be. So I educated myself. I got certified with the state, so I became awarded based on the court's eyes and ears for the benefit of the child. And at that time, it was emotional, obviously, everything that I went through, but I also, a lot of prayer and just a lot of discernment, trying to decide where I'm going and what I'm doing. And at that time, I asked her, I said, well, if I take care of these kids, who's going to take care of my kids? And she said, well, God says, take care of my things and I'll take care of your things.
Right.
So at that point, that's how everything started. I was taking care of kids, and obviously there's certain things we can talk about regarding cases, but that inspired me to continue to survive, to continue to be there for my kids no matter what, and to obviously help other children at the same time. And I got more involved in the community. I do volunteering with the Homeless Coalition and some of the church ministries, and I also volunteer at the school. But it's not about, I always believe, again, since I've been grown into the military and doing things as an individual, I'll do what I can for you now and you'll take care of me later.
That's a great philosophy to live by. And anyone that works with kids, I mean, that's a very noble cause. And there are a lot of kids out there that don't have a voice. So I know, with some experience with the Guardian Ad Litem program, that it's very necessary. And I can imagine, as a writer myself, going through, that kind of journey or that kind of experience, how writing would be therapeutic and healing and definitely a way to vent. Because, when you get that anger going, it's like, what's the safest, easiest, healthiest way to get it out?
Sure.
And I know I've got, 6 books worth of that stuff. So it's like, yes, I'm just going to spew right now. I don't care.
Right.
And it inevitably, I feel that writing from that place helps other people when they read your work. And regardless of people's religious beliefs or political beliefs or whatever beliefs, the written word is powerful.
Sure.
So
Definitely.
it's, and writing from the place you wrote from I can imagine that was, hard at times, but healing at times.
Oh, sure. There was many nights where you shed a tear based on the experience at the moment that I was going through. And I always believe that, no matter what, I love my boys. Obviously we brought them into the world to be there, and the other issue will take care of itself. You know, we have a good relationship, and the boys are in a wonderful position now as far as, what they're doing with their lives.
Right.
And as mom and dad, we need to do the best that we can for them, not just now, but every day. And during that
Yeah.
time, that was one of the things that I always believed that, no matter what, we're going to get through this, and with a lot of prayer, obviously, and respect. That's a huge thing. Trust and respect is a major part in any relationship.
Absolutely. There's a lot of that missing out there in the world. So would you like to read from the book to
I have, let me pull this up here on my electronic reader. But as far as the book itself, I self-published it, or co-published it, I guess is the best way to say it. With God's grace and help, finally I was able to electronically publish it, and it's available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. At the time when I did complete it, I submitted it to Columbia University for the Pulitzer Prize. This was back in, I had October 31st was my deadline, 2012. And I submitted that. Unfortunately, it was not in print at the time, which it currently is in the process over the next few months. That's one of the goals. But those are the guidelines based
That's a
on,
requirement that it's a
it
print
has
version.
to be a print
Yeah.
version, right?
what I
And then
thought.
we'll talk about my other book later. That's print as well as electronic reader. But mostly this book here, which is, it's an electronic book as well as audiobook. It's available also on iTunes as an audio. I narrated it myself, so it's considered unabridged. And
this is all stuff you did on your own,
correct.
like self-publishing,
Right,
basically.
exactly. I mean, ever since I was younger, years ago, before the computers became like an everyday kind of thing to use, I spent a lot of time at the library. So I guess if we can backtrack for a few minutes while I'm pulling this up here in my introduction here, but I was in the Navy for 5 years. I started my college education at City College Chicago, which is Howard, Washington, but it was overseas.
Right.
And I finally graduated in 2006 from from University of South Florida. And I graduated my degree in communications, my bachelor's. So after a 15-year career of continuing my education, life, finances, kids being born, that was one of the things, one of the goals that I stuck with no matter what. I work full time, for a period of time. I go to school full time. So a lot of times I was just determined that I'll get what I need however long it takes.
Right.
And that was one of the inspiration things that I've used. So while I was a USF, I've been writing since I was, I think, 11 or 12, kind of like yourself.
Okay.
Kind of more personal things and journal things, and not really doing any big things yet until my first book was released in 1997. So we'll talk about that as well. But when I was at USF, I was a columnist for the USF Oracle, and I did a weekly column, and it was mostly based on inspiration and motivation. That's always my work, that it's always been. So any related stories that I've gone through or shared or I've experienced has always found its way into my work.
Okay.
And that's my theme, I guess. That's my gift.
And that's a good thing.
So, okay, so I have the introduction here. So this is just started. It's called A Father's Love, dedicated to my 2 boys. And the introduction is, Daddy, I had a nightmare. One day I woke up in the middle of the night and I was crying. I was calling your name, Daddy, Daddy, but you weren't there. I was very sad. I was crying for you, Daddy. I had a nightmare, Daddy. I couldn't sleep. Daddy, I called for you to help me. These were the words that I heard from my 5-year-old son at the time. And again, I have a teenager at the time that was all this unfolding. So that was pretty much the beginning of the book. And as you read, continue to hear it or audio, however you choose, because the books are available. It just goes into, for example, one of the things that I wanted to establish for this book was the words. First one was father, is defined as a male parent of any type of offspring, The verb to father means to procreate or to serve a child, which derives the gerund fathering. Foster, further promote the growth or foster our children's well-being and education, to nurture and help develop, help grow and nurture his or her talents. Anger, because there were some issues. A strong emotion, a feeling that is oriented towards someone real or supposed grievance. Hatred, the emotion of intense dislike, a feeling of dislike so strong that it demands action. And then faith, a strong belief in a supernatural power or powers that control human destiny, complete confidence in a person, plan, or being. And that's how everything unfolded at that time when I was getting into the guardian ad litem, the relationship with my boys,
Right.
and what I believe I need to do in order to survive.
Okay.
I always believe, ever since I was a kid in the military, that I'm going to make it no matter what. And there was a time that, as we continue to discuss here between ourselves, I was, I guess, a mama's boy growing up. And, as you get older, you learn to appreciate things that you had when you were younger.
Right.
And when I was, 18, being away from home for the first time, I was in the middle of the Indian Ocean on the aircraft carrier. Lost, I guess, at that time. Even though I was still doing something, I was still lost, if you can see the big picture.
Yeah.
And there was a time where I just felt my whole world was collapsing. There was nothing really worth living for. I had no wife, girlfriend, whatever. I had no parents. And there are, some guys that I worked with, but it wasn't really like something you can call home.
Right.
And, I remember, as far as spiritually looking back now, if you've read books, I'm sure, and heard things, the dark night of the soul.
Right.
I think even your previous guest on your last show, Mr. Day, was talking about his dark, the way he writes and certain
Right.
things. And the theme is, I believe everyone has something that they go through.
Oh, absolutely.
And staying positive. So I remember, here you are, if you can picture in your mind, on the flight deck, 50 feet above water, standing on the edge in the middle of the night. And I wrote about this, the things that I went through when I was at USF. I wrote about my experiences.
Right.
And as we continue to talk, I'll share a few more things. So kind of open up who JJ, John Nodar is my real name, but JJ is my writing name. That at that time, I thought about ending it all. I thought about that this is too much. I can't handle it. And things that I've gone through that now, I can share with my son now, who's older. He's 19. But during this time, I was able to, and I still will, and I'll still continue to relate because I've gone through that. Maybe a whole different scenario, obviously.
Right.
But it's still, you're a man or a young man, and you're still doing something that can either make you or break you.
I agree. And we all have had the dark place. I mean, there's nobody exempt from that. We as writers tend to go, I think, a little deeper into that place because that's just, I think, how we're tuned to function.
Sure.
And being able to put that on paper and express it that way, I think that's a saving grace for a lot of writers. I know it was for me because I had that thought process as well, and I wrote furiously through it. And it gave me some balance and the ability to kind of go back and read it and go, okay, it's not that bad. I never say it could be worse because it's when you're in that place at that time, it is the worst.
Sure.
It just, in your mind, it can't get any worse than this. Realistically, it can always get worse, but
Correct.
The way the mind works, it's like, this is it. This is the worst it's ever going to be, and this is horrible, and I can't even imagine, the idea that it might get worse.
Sure.
And so, I immediately had the visual when you were talking about being on the flight deck, because I lived in Cuba for 3 years, and the ships all came there.
Sure.
It was a stopping point for wherever they were going after that. And so I've been on, some of the ships, and I've been on the flight decks, and it's like, wow, you take a leap off of that, there's no return from that. That's like a many-story building.
Well, that's it. And a lot of times they always said it's like hitting cement because you're high above the water. But if you can picture, it was summertime, it was hot, and what we were doing is, in the military, I'm sure you heard the term balls to four,
Yes.
which would be working midnight till 4 in the morning.
Right.
We were working our regular 12-hour shift, or 14, depending on whatever the day was. And then we work our security shift through the night because we had to keep, lockdown on the aircrafts and everything. So pretty much we were the only one there at that time during that shift, and there was no one else around. And it was so hot, and I was so sad, and it was just like one of those difficult moments, you know. And I was standing there, and it was so hot, and I was looking down, and I'm always sometimes a goofball when it comes to. That's one of the things that I've saved myself through everything. Part of the gifts is having humor.
Right.
That if you can see the good things in everything and try to see how light it is without bogging yourself down with the serious stuff that's happening.
Right.
At that time, I was thinking, well, if I was to jump, who would miss me? All these things going through my head. Because again, I was 18.
Right.
So now I can relate with my son because he was 18. Now he's 19. So at that time, I was thinking, well, if you jump, you might not make it. If you do, you're probably going to be maimed or something because you might break a leg or break your back or get sucked under the propellers and everything. So it might not really be worth it. And in the middle of the night, it was so hot. I remember a cool breeze coming across the deck, and I just felt that was the spirit. That was God's grace. Like, this is not for you.
Not an option.
There is no choice, exactly. And now, as I'm 44, looking back over what I've gone through over the years, and this is going on 20 years at least, there's nothing worse that, like you shared, that I went through at that time that's never going to compare. So if I made it through that, I can make it through anything else.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So that was my test, I guess, and that was what I went through. And, you learn from that. Certain things, again, when you're going through it, you might not think, oh, this is anything. This has no importance or value or significance.
Right.
But it really does. And,
well, everything in life.
Oh, sure.
Everything's interconnected. And I think when, going back to we as writers, when we go through these kind of experiences, I don't know. I kind of look at it as, well, I'm going to throw this at you and this is going to suck and you're going to hate this and it's going to make your life miserable. But somewhere down the line, you're going to help people through that experience because
Sure.
you made it through, you survived it. And so now you have words of wisdom for somebody that's standing on that deck
Sure.
on a hot summer night, looking down and going, oh my God, it's hopeless. I don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
And, your words in some way, shape or form, through a book, through whatever, because I know they do a lot of reading on the ships. I remember talking to guys about that. And there's always that idea for me as a writer, and I hold on to this very, very dearly, but there's always that idea that every word I write is something that I'm putting out there to help another person, to possibly save a life, to possibly shift a life. And I think that's why we do it.
Right.
I mean, whether it's through poetry, through screenplays, through prose, through whatever the means is, playwriting, whatever it is, I think deep down inside, there's always kind of that little mission, like, okay, I went through this and I made it, and somebody out there is going to go through this inevitably, and maybe my words will help them make the right decision to not take that leap.
Sure.
So having a book that's very faith-based, and not just religious faith, but human faith
Right.
and life faith, to have that as a foundation for your work it's profound.
Right. Well, I call it faith care because as I've gone through my own journey and over the past year, I went back to school to get my master's and process at St. Leo's in theology. So a lot of trying to merge my personal life with the professional life. And a lot of the classes that I've taken have dealt with human dignity and social justice and helping people and doing more, getting involved in ministry. And that's what I've been doing, but not just based on I'm a Catholic and you're not, or whatever the religion is. We're in this together. And what we can do to help each other, whether it's by our words or our actions, can go a long way.
Yeah, I think we've kind of lost that along the way, and it's necessary to bring it back. What is your writing process? Do you lock yourself in a small room and turn on a spotlight, or
No,
we've had some pretty bizarre. Sure. I've had some pretty bizarre.
Sure. Well, the other book we'll talk about, but in regards to the Father's love, it was mostly just in the middle of the nights, waking up at 12 or 3 o'clock. Certain times where you can't sleep, I would just write down whatever I was feeling. Whether it's all based on emotions, but what I was going through, And that's why even some of the words that my boys were saying I used because that's touched my heart.
Right.
So there's things that I would be able to use. And I've always tried to have a positive attitude in everything that I do and everything I come across. And the experiences at that time, I would just sit and write. I wasn't actually, it's funny because it's kind of like a puzzle. I always tell my son, who's, going to be 8 now, you start at the corners, you work the walls and work your way in because you set the foundation and you build in instead of trying to put all the pieces around in the middle because there's no connection.
Right.
So when I started this book and the year and a half, because I started in 2009, 10, and so finally it was done in 2011, it was a whole 2 books, those little black and white composition books that you can buy at the store. That's what I always use since I was a kid.
25 cents.
Yeah, we always use those. And I still continue. That's where I keep my personal, this is my work, my journal. So, but it was from page, let's say, however many pages. I didn't sit and write page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which comes out in a book. It was like 2, 6, 4, 3, 2, 1. Because whatever I was going through at that time and what I was feeling and whatever I was experiencing, I wrote down.
Right.
And it was page to page to page, but it wasn't in order. I wasn't thinking that I was going to write a book and make this something that actually became what it is today. It was just
free writing.
Exactly. It was what I was.
Tell me, okay, as a writer, is that not the best writing?
It is.
It's liberating. It's not, when you sit down and go, okay, chapter 1.
Oh, you get like the brain block or whatever brain
it was
freeze.
A dark and dreary night, and
Sure.
and I have a hard time with that. But the free writing, and I've just started doing that again because I have been really conditioned in, I've written 6 poetry books. I'm about to put out number 7, and I wrote a novel, and they're all very structured. Even the poetry, it's like, their life experiences, and I wrote the poems and I put them together in a book and went, okay, this is like part 1 of life and part 2 of life and divorce and,
Right.
child. And there's always some kind of a reason for what I did. And I went with my friend yesterday to Barnes and Noble, and I was like, I have so many journals. I'm a journal junkie. I've got like 12 journals that I've started and have 3 or 4 pages or a page or no pages.
Right. Just a title.
It's a journal because it's cool looking. It's
Right.
like, oh, what an awesome looking journal, And I have a stack of really cool looking composition books with really like bright colors or just fun stuff, and they're all blank. But at some point I will write in these. But yesterday I thought, I'm going to do a free write journal and just write whatever's in my mind at that moment. It doesn't need to be cohesive at all.
Right.
And for me, that's an exercise in, oh my gosh, that's a serious exercise because I am very conditioned about how I do my writing. So, I saw you sit in the car downstairs when I got here, and I was like, oh, okay, I've got some time. And I brought my journal with me, and I wrote the first chapter. See, I'm already conditioning myself. The first paragraph.
Okay.
And it was like, I can do this because in the end, whatever it turns out to be is going to affect regardless of, I may just put out a book that has absolutely no cohesion whatsoever, and it's just going to bounce everywhere. But journaling is it takes a lot of discipline to
Sure.
journal. It really, to consistently.
Sure.
I know a lot of writers that have started 1 million journals.
Right.
And my neighbor came over the other day. She's cracking up. She's like, oh my God, I found a journal from like 1995 or something, and she started reading it and she's just cracking up. And she's like, oh my God, I'm saying the same thing now that I was saying 10 years ago. And, and it's like, but we never finished that journal.
Sure.
It's like those thoughts are there and then we go, okay, I'm better now and move on.
Right.
But to be able to go, through that process from beginning to end and put it into a book is admirable.
Oh, thank you. And a lot of times, even when I was in my classes, some of the classes for my master's degree nowadays, just like any of the schools, are all computer generated. So you're all going to be doing your Microsoft Word and all these written programs, processing programs. But I'm, I guess, old school. I always like to put pen on the paper. And even in my class and notes, I'd always, when I'd have to do my papers for the classes or whatever, I always want a rough draft. I always want to see my work. I always want to see it. And then I'll type it. Might take a little longer. It takes those extra days or hours, but I always feel comfortable because at that time I can make the correction as I'm seeing it. And when I do put it all together, because I've heard a lot of writers as well, like you're saying, some of them start even when they're writing from the back of the book and everything comes up to the front. And then
Right.
that's just the way it comes out, as like you said, free flow.
Well, it's interesting, the different ways that writers write, the different, like me, I have to be, um, I have writers that say I write 2,000 words a day, every day, no matter what, even if I write the same word over and over and over and over again, because it's conditioning.
Correct.
I am an impulse writer. It's like, oh, something popped into my mind. Quick, sit down, write it. I carry the little cassette recorder in my car in
Yeah, I
case
used
I'm
to do that.
driving so I don't kill the innocent people out there. I have a little notebook next to my bed and a pen and a nightlight I can quickly turn on. And I never used to be that anal about my writing. It's like, if I wake up in the middle of the night and I have this really brilliant idea, I know I'm going to go to sleep and it'll be gone in the morning. That wasn't meant to be, which is ridiculous.
Right.
So now I truly just carry something with me all the time. Because I think as writers, we grow and change, and our writing grows and changes as we do it through the years more and more often. So the other book, tell me about the other book.
The other book is called The Book of Jude. Based on my life and my story with my family, we've been mostly in the religious faith based on the Roman Catholic tradition. And St. Jude, if you've heard of the Saint of Impossible Cases. So my mom was pregnant with me at the time and fell down some stairs. So this is a story that she told me that they were going to lose the baby. So they prayed to St. Jude that I would be born and healthy and all that. So St. Jude is my middle name. Well, Jude, not Saint. And that's how the book came about. This actually was formulated based on, ever since I was a child, I wanted to get into the NFL as a professional athlete. And when I was in high school, I played football. I didn't go to college, but I was in the Navy. Didn't really play any organized other than just the pickup games and the squadron games. So I was still into football. I got out of the Navy in 93, and I still had that dream. It was like that burning feeling that you got to do something. So I remember it was 1993, and my wife was pregnant with our first son at the time, and I still have a lot of family that lives here in Tampa, aunts and uncles and cousins, and I wish them all the best in life and all that great stuff. But at that time, we were visiting, and I had my Tampa Bay, which was old orange and what they call that, popsicle cars. And they used to be on $1 Place, which was the old shack there behind the International Plaza, which is there now, but wasn't at the time. And I walked in, and Sam Weiss was a coach at the time, so now we're like dating ourselves. And I said, "Hi, my name's John, and I'm here to play football." I mean, sometimes I'm just a goof, but I always put myself out there.
Right.
And they said, "Really? Okay." So I thought they were going to get security, but they got Sam Weiss and one of the players, the representatives that work with the scouts and stuff, and told me how I would have to do that. And again, this is in 1993. So at the time, I was figuring out what I can do and how I can do it, and he told me what I need to do in regards to college and scouts. And so that was in 1993. I was making phone calls around because they were telling you how to get represented through agencies. And at the time, when I was talking to so many people, I was working at the Hampton Inn. So now we're looking at 1994. So already a year later, I was still working and networking and doing all that great stuff, because I always felt that if God's given me the ability to talk, and again, this goes back to years, and I laugh now because my son sometimes, the little guy, gets in trouble for talking too much in school. And that's used to happen to me when I was a kid in school. And my degree's in communications from USF. So you see the pattern? Exactly.
I do.
And writing, I write what I feel, again, based on talking, but it's written communication. And then as well as what I try to do in my life. So at the time I was working at the Hampton Inn in Naples, Florida. That's where we were living, and my son was born. And again, 1994, I started there, and I was making phone calls to these different agencies across the country. And the first thing I always heard at that time was, they asked me, and again, this is nothing obviously based on life today, but they asked me, "Are you black?" And I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "Well, are you going to be going to college?" I said, "No, I'm not." I said, "A lot of
Is
this."
Is that the criteria?
That's what I was wondering. I was like, I was told, and I'm sure you've heard, because we're from the same background in life and the history and our culture, that a lot of times you have the desire to do something, you're going to find a way. And they have walk-ons. You've heard of that before
Yes.
as all. They have walk-ons. A lot of times it's who you know. So that's why, again, I thought by me walking in there and, hi, I'm John, that would get my foot in the door. But it didn't work out that way. So I was doing the networking around, and then, I kept getting shot down. So I was working at the time at Hampton, and so now we're going 94, 95, 96, so 3 years that I was working on this. I started contacting all the 32 teams. I think there was 30 at the time. That was back in 1996 is when everything started wrapping together. Everything started coming together. And I found out there was the way actually you can get in. They call it a combine. So it's based on invitation only. So again, based on talking to all these different people and talking to some representatives from different teams, like in Seattle, the Seahawks, and then the 49ers, and then I remember the Giants and the Dolphins and the Bucks and all these people that I was communicating with, what can I do? What can I do? So they kept saying the same thing. So one day I was working at Hampton Inn, so we're already looking at 1996 now. And I was a night auditor. I was working the front desk overnight, and my wife was working during the time, housekeeping during the day. So she would be working while I'd take care of my son, and I'd be working while she'd take care of my son, or our son.
Right.
And there was a recruiter. I didn't know who he was at the time. Come in, I checked him in, and we were talking, and I shared with him my dream of what I'm trying to do. And he came down once he checked in his room, and he said, "Hi, I'm Tim Purdue. I'm Tim Salem, a recruiter from Purdue." And I was like, oh, okay. So we were talking, and he says, well, I'm actually down here recruiting people from Purdue, for Purdue, and he knows connections with the Bucks. So, again, and I'm relating this based on what I'm going to share with you in a minute to what I went through with my chief back in the Navy when I was going for my orders. I'll see what I can do, but I can't promise anything.
Right.
So now I'm talking with Tim Salem, who's actually, I think he's a recruiter with UCF now. I've talked with him a few times over the years. So we're looking at 1996. About a month or so after that, again, I think it was around the same time, January, February, and I get a letter from him. He said, I can't promise anything, but I'll see what I can do.
The magic words
and,
for you.
And that's what it's always been on those certain things. It's amazing. And one of the letters was, nice meeting you, congratulations. It was an invitation to the combine.
Wow.
So, and what I'm going to share with you now is also all the things, even my story that I shared with you was written when I was at USF about my experience and my dark night of the soul, if you want to call it, when I was in the military. And now my experience as trying out for the NFL. And what happened was I had to find my way to get there. I had to pay my own way, but I was invited. I was already booked in as someone trying out. So that was a blessing in itself. Working at the Hampton, and I talked with my manager and said, see if they can comp a room. So we did. We got Atlanta. That's where we were, Atlanta. And then I had to find a way to fly up there or get up there. And I remember it was either Delta for 228 out of Fort Myers, because again, we're living in Naples at the time, or Valley Jet out of Miami. And do you remember what happened at Valley Jet?
Oh, yes, I do.
I flew out of Delta in Miami. My son and my wife, he was 3 at the time, and my mother were there at the airport and flew off. I paid the $20 extra instead of going to Miami, obviously.
Right.
And when I got to Atlanta, I got my rental car, I did all that, and everyone's around the whole airport screaming and crying. I didn't know what happened, but this is what I'm talking about is when the Valley Jet crashed in the Everglades.
Right.
Which was the jet that I was the two between
wow.
the Delta or the Valley Jet. So I get to the hotel and I turn on CNN and they're talking about the crash. And I just drop to my knees and pray and say, thank you, Jesus. So that's what happened at that time. And again, that was Mother's Day weekend. The same thing happened when I was going into the military, when I got the orders to go to Spain. That was the Mother's Day weekend. And
wow.
that was, 1990.
So magic words, magic day. Okay.
Well, I mean, that's just something, it was like, I'll do the best I can with whatever I'm given.
Right.
And so I went there, I did the best I could. I got the video, whatever they needed for this thing. So I come back to Tampa. This was in June now, so we're looking in May because that's when Mother's Day was. And I went up there, everything. I did what I had to do so I can get, I guess, qualifications for now I can talk to the teams. So it was June 17th, I believe, in 1996. And I went up to Tampa here because I was, again, living in Naples. And I walked in. I said, hi, I'm John. I'm here to play football. Tony Dungy was just becoming the head coach at the time. And I met him. I met Mark Dominic, who was a pro player scout, personal, who's a GM now. So I was actually introduced to everybody, and they said, well, we didn't get the video, but we'll walk around, and it winded up being, I met Trent Dilfer and Reagan Upshaw and all their players, and everything was nice. It was very respectful, very decent, but I didn't make it. They walked me back outside, thank you for trying, but you're not going to make the team.
All right.
I said, really? Can I help? Can I do something? I got my gear, I got my equipment, I got all this stuff. So it was, to me, I did everything I could that was possible to make it happen.
The idea that you I can't honestly tell you, outside of having and raising my children, that I have ever put that kind of energy into my dream, ever. And to me, because I have this huge fear of failure, like, oh my gosh, what if I do it and it doesn't work? Well, I don't want to reflect back and go, well, what if I did do it and it did work? Or what if I did do it and it didn't work, but I at least had the experience?
Right. I wish you could have, would have, should have.
I commend you for having that kind of drive and determination. I mean, I don't think I've ever met anybody that has been that focused on, that's like me walking into, Simon & Schuster and going, hi, my name is Mona and you're going to publish me. Because, I would be terrified to do something. Right. But what's the worst that can happen? They look at you and I'm sorry, you're not going to make the team, but thanks for trying. And you've had that life experience. That's amazing.
Well, that was it. In regards to your Simon & Schuster, I did contact them about my book. I said, hi, I'm John. I'd like to, write for you. And they said, thank you very much. But, so that's how I became self-published. I kind of educated myself in what I need to do and make things happen. Because I always felt if I'm given the ability to do something, I'll try to educate myself and teach myself how to do it.
Right.
It might take a little while. It might take longer than I thought. And as far as the money, obviously, I've always tried to do the most I can with a little amount of money or no money.
Let me ask you something. Do you think that the electronic books, the Nook and the Kindle and all these readers and everything, do you think that's affected publishing and opportunities for us as writers to get published?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it can be, just like they say, technology. I mean, when we were growing up, 8-tracks, cassettes, and then CDs, and then, now VHS is no longer, and DVDs. But I see a lot of, and I've done a lot of research also recently, that these, let's say, Hay House and Simon Schuster and a few of the other ones, I was going to say pocketbooks. They are working with self-publishing agencies to help promote electronic and the written form, but you're still paying the service. So you're really not doing anything other than paying someone to do your work, which they promise you sometimes the world.
Right.
But it's not really, I shared this with my mom. She's a children's author too. And I think, part of my experience and what I've gone through is through her. And my son's an artist. He's also into music and DJ, my older son. And he's awesome. He does some great stuff with the music. And like you were saying before, this free flow, whether it's writing or whether it's art or music or poetry. I've done some poetry too. And so it's just amazing how you can have your gifts to share with other people. But yes, I do believe that the network for the electronic readers, because there's so many of them. There's Sony, there's different forms that I've been blessed to educate myself through. ePubit, that's through the Barnes & Noble's Pubit network. And then the Kindle KDP is a electronic service that they offer for doing the formats of the book, as you mentioned earlier about how to do it and how to get involved. But I do believe that, that does make it more available to the reader to get the books. But I always believe that the tangible, the written work is...
I've had this conversation with so many writers, and I am just diehard. Give me the book to hold in my hand and turn the pages. It's like a love affair.
Sure, you can smell it. You can see.
Yes, and the sound of the page flipping and the feel,
the little paper cuts and all that stuff.
Yeah. And when I go and publish a new book and do a book signing, I can't sign somebody's Kindle.
Correct.
Not that I'm narcissistic and think everybody wants my signature in a book, but when you do a book signing, people go, "Oh, can you sign it?"
Yeah.
For whatever
dedicate
reason.
it to whoever.
We're in the world of eBay now. People.
Right.
And I have a few I have a book that was signed by Harlan Ellison, which is like, to me, it's like I will never ever get rid of it because it means so much to me. And it was a gift from someone. But I don't think as many hard copy books are published. But I mean, when how many bookstores do we have out there?
Oh, so
We
many
have
of
now,
them.
but it's Barnes and Noble.
Oh, the main ones, correct.
I mean, I was never a big Barnes and Noble fan. I like the other one,
Right.
which is no longer in business, and I was totally devastated by that.
Sure.
And the few small independent bookstores, like Wilson's Book World in
Correct.
St. Pete and Haslam's
Book Swap. All these other ones.
yeah, it's like, you go in there and you just have that moment where you're like, oh,
Yeah, it
really?
feels like you can get back in time because you feel you can sense something that
absolutely. And it's so impersonal. And I have a Nook.
Sure.
And I have some books on it, and I read and I go, okay, this is great. I'm reading this book, and I paid $6.99 instead of $14.99 or $19.99 or $29.99 or whatever. But I'm laying in bed and I'm like, it's just not the same. It's a very passionate connection for people with books. It always has been ever since we've had books. I mean, there was a time when books were so expensive that the common person couldn't afford them. Only the wealthy had them.
Right. The people that knew how to read and all that great stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, I mean, you have this very rich history and life that you have put pen to paper.
Right.
And it's going to affect lives.
For sure.
I mean, it's clearly affected your children's lives.
Correct.
It will affect the lives of anyone that reads it. It affects your life. I mean, I know when I go through and, again, handle my book and I flip through, I have friends come over and I'm very much into poetry, and I'll be sitting there on my computer and my friend will come over and she'll start, reciting a poem, and I have my back to her. And she'll finish it and I'll go, wow, when did you write that? And she goes, that's yours. I just read it out of your book. I'm kind of like Johnny Depp in that respect. Like, he never goes to watch his movies. I never go back to read my books. So I don't even know what's out there, to be perfectly honest. But, and I haven't worked at putting them into format for electronic reading, which is probably to my detriment.
Yeah. Well, we can always, I can help you with that, or
That's
help anybody
awesome.
else with that.
And I can help you with
we
doing
help
print copies.
Oh, sure. Because also, in regards to how the Book of Jude, my first book, came out in 1997, I actually submitted that as well to Columbia University for the Pulitzer Prize. And at that time, that was in print. Okay. So it did get accepted into the order for the contest. I did not win.
Oh, but again, I mean, I'm so inspired by you. I can't even tell you, because I have these conversations with my friends. They're like, oh, you're so talented. You're such a great writer. Why aren't you doing something with it? And I'm like, oh, okay, at some point, and I have my bucket list of things.
Sure.
I want an Academy Award, and I want a Pulitzer Prize, and I want a Nobel Peace Prize, and I have the whole list, and I want to do that more so to say that, yes, this has been my journey and these are my goals, and I'm going to go out and I'm going to make this happen. But, I mean, the idea of submitting my work for no, I would not in a million years think to do that. And you just like, hi, I'm going to play football. Hi, I'm going to submit my work for the Pulitzer Prize. Hi, I'm going to, join the Navy at 18 and see. I mean, that kind of dedication to life, and, it has to make you a writer when you're that kind of person. You have to be a writer.
Art. I'm also, I worked with the Tampa Bay Community Network years ago, who are no longer here, but also in film and editing. So part of the entertainment, but I believe my mission or purpose is to educate and entertain, as I'll get more into the radio network, like we talked about, as well, doing my own shows and helping people and teaching what I've learned so it can help someone else. The book I made, the Book of Jude, was actually given to, when I first released my first copy, to Tony Dungy and to Mark Dominic. At that time, I gave them the first copy because I appreciated what they did. And even though the time when I didn't make it, I made the team, driving back to Naples was about 3 hours, a lot of tears and crying, I was like, I let it out. I was able to, I made it. So,
I want to make sure that I get this out there before we're done. You have a blog.
Correct.
It's on Blogspot, so it's jjnodar.blogspot.com.
Correct.
And definitely go on. I checked out the blog. Way cool.
Thank you.
We've got the ebook and audiobook are available. So we've got it on Amazon for $7.99,
Correct.
Barnes and Noble for $7.99, iTunes for $6.95.
Correct.
And you also have a YouTube video. So if we type in your name, will that video pop up?
You have to go into YouTube and type in the title, which is A Father's Love by J.J. Nodar.
Okay.
And then it will come up. You'll see it's a 28-second clip. And I got this from a friend who, again, by us helping each other, Animoto.com, you can build a video for free for 30 seconds or less. So you'll see my clip of my book, the audio that I just shared with,
Right.
everybody here about my son. And then that also wraps up in the book too about, my son with the nightmares. And then I also asked him, do you dream about daddy? And he said, yes. I said, well, bring daddy from your dreams into your nightmares and I'll beat all these shadow creatures, monsters. And,
That's
and then he was like, I
amazing.
love you, daddy. Then he's always asking, how much do you love me? I said, I love you bunches. And then I asked him, again, years ago, I asked him, how much you love me? He said, 100,062,000. There's this number he comes up with. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. But, I love my boys. And right now, currently, as we wrap up, I work at Starbucks. I've been doing that since October for the holidays mostly.
Right.
But it's fun. I work from 4:30 in the morning till 10:30. And I work over there mostly in the morning. Just I give a kind word to somebody while I get their coffee, and it's a great feeling. And if you know Starbucks, they have the pick of the week, and that's where I'm also building the network now. So hopefully the book will be available to iTunes because that's iTunes pick of the week.
Right.
And since it's already on iTunes and now trying to get them to promote it, and that's what we're working on now too. So I just felt if I'm part of the family, the Starbucks again, the network,
Right.
then that's one way we continue to help each other. And, I can share what I've gone through as, I build my radio network or anything that we do to help each other. I
Right.
think it's just the whole thing that I believe that we have the opportunity and, you can be corny, again, part of the humor, I guess, is that's what makes me work. That's, how I
Right.
tick. But if you want to go about like Spider-Man, with Uncle Ben, great power becomes great responsibility. So as we're given our gifts, the writing that we have the ability to communicate, whether it's through our words or our actions or our deeds, they mean something.
And sharing them with the world is definitely something we should do. And I've had several people now say, how dare you think it's okay not to share what you do on a bigger scale than you do. And I just kind of like, yeah, I do it. I love it. It's, it's my passion. It's everything I want to be and everything I do. But, the idea of walking in and going, hi there, I'm gonna play football today.
Yeah.
I mean, I am so inspired by your drive and your dedication. And so you've already affected a life with me. And I know you're going to affect a lot of people that listen to this podcast because I know there's a lot of people sitting out there going, well, tomorrow when I wake up, I'm going to do this.
Right.
And then you wake up 40 years later and go, wow, I kind of forgot to wake up tomorrow and do this.
Sure.
So that's, I know this is going to inspire. I'm so
sure.
glad you came on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm really excited and I'm definitely going to read your book. And we'll definitely stay in touch so that we can, and again, go check out the blog post. It's JJ Nodar, NODAR.blogspot.com.
Correct.
And go on YouTube, type in A Father's Love by JJ Nodar and check out the YouTube video. And, once your hard copy comes out or your next book comes out, I'd love to have you back on the show again and, definitely inspire some more because I'm going to be talking about this to some people tonight.
I appreciate it. It's been a pleasure and a definitely blessing to be here to share this with you. I thank you very much for the invitation.
I thank you too. And I want to thank everybody out there for listening to Right at 5. I'm Mona Lisa. Have a wonderful week and I'll see you next week.